Just a quick apology to our listeners before we begin. We did reach out to Taylor Swift pre the recording of this podcast to see if she might want to come on to announce the release of her new album. Unfortunately, she seems to have taken that announcement somewhere else. But anyway, we did try. And with that, on with today's show.
Hi, DT. Missed you last night. Do you
Yeah.
know where I was?
I do, but you could tell our listeners.
Well, I will tell everyone. There's a thing that I love, and it's kind of 4 times a year, the Anti-Financial Crime Film Club, which is, we're part of that because we're members of the Association of Corporate Investigators. And it's such a great initiative because we meet like 4 times a year, something like that. We go to a venue and a group of anti-financial crime professionals who will be lawyers, people from data analytics. We have risk specialists. We have people that are frontline branch staff, people in investigations triage, real risk specialists. And we watch some kind of film, and then we discuss it afterwards collectively. And when you've got all that intellectual capital in a room and also people drawn from all those different disciplines, you get a really good conversation and it's really thought-provoking. And we watched a brilliant thing last night. We were hosted by the ACCA, who are the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants.
Yep.
And we were hosted there they're in the Adelphi building. Have you ever been there?
I haven't, no. I mean, it sort of sounds familiar, but I wouldn't know.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it? But it's tucked away, this quiet street, no one in that street. It's just behind the Strand.
Okay.
It's between the Strand and the set of gardens that are on the embankment.
Yep, no, I know exactly where you are. There's a nice wine bar around the corner there.
If you do,
allegedly.
So let's sew up your Strasser. And the ground floor is Spotify. So it's kind of cool, kind of hip. Yeah. But up above, just as cool, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, very cool. So we were up in there,
yep.
And we watched an amazing Netflix documentary together, which is it's Titan, which is about the OceanGate submersible disaster.
Yeah,
right. And that is just such an incredible thing to watch. And again, because we're in London, we're thinking about finance and money and stuff, and this was kind of taking you quite out of your comfort zone. In fact, it was very uncomfortable to watch. I felt kind of claustrophobic.
I'm sure, yeah. I'm not sure I would enjoy that viewing, but being quite claustrophobic myself. But anyway,
it was good because I found it's quite accessible viewing. It's a story that everyone can relate to and understand. Tragically, 5 lives were lost. So this was a sort of experimental submersible put together by a guy called Stockton Rush, who really was a very, very charismatic and kind of, big personality, big individual. And there were 4 other people on this sub with him: Paul-Henri Nargeolet, kind of really kind of experienced French naval commander, Hamish Harding, a British businessman, and Shahzadi Dawood and Suleiman Dawood, who are father and son, Pakistanis, very successful. And they went down in this submarine on its last voyage, and it was fatal, right? They were lost, and the eyes of the world were on it. And that was the other interesting thing, is there was so much footage for you to see, all the build up. They filmed everything, because he was a real Stockton Rush. He really came across as someone who knew how to market, and was thinking very, very much, very big salesman, and thinking about having, they really made the point, actually, because they had sort of like, a young female intern who was kind of being pushed up up the rankings into, to get her to be a pilot,
right?
And this would be a great face to have, and all of the kind of engineers on the team, really young, people out of college in their 20s, all exciting stuff and good story.
I've read a fair amount about it. I think the case has been heard recently, so there's been a bit more press recently on it. Obviously, I remember it happening at the time. I mean, was it its first voyage, or had other voyages happened before? Or this was the first sort of, not televised, that's not quite the word, but it's the sort of where someone had paid, etc.
This is the point. It was the commercial,
right? That's the word I was looking for.
Voyage, and the technology, what you realized in watching this was not just that the technology wasn't really proven, but also there was, flaws in the process. Because what were they doing? They were doing something smart and innovative. They were building a submersible out of carbon fiber, to go to those kind of depths. And normally you would use titanium, you'd use steel, these are heavy materials.
Yeah.
And then, that makes it very strong, but then transporting that submersible to where you want to go around the world to use it, that becomes very costly.
Right.
So this was really going to be revolutionary in terms of, bringing that cost down. So you could see the attraction to people in this. And they first started, I think some of the earlier designs were in conjunction with Boeing. So a little pause there, but actually Boeing came out of it looking quite good.
Yeah.
Sorry, a bit controversial on Boeing. Sorry about that. These are not the views of Skadi. No, I mean absolutely are. But there you go. But they were using carbon fiber,
right?
And it was just interesting watching them testing this stuff. And again, it's the marketing spin. It's the salesman come out. So when there's like obvious problems with carbon fiber. So carbon fiber, I mean, it was great for me, right? Because all the kids do pole vault.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of learning so much about carbon fiber, and that's that's in the poles, and why occasionally poles break.
Yeah.
And you don't know why. But I really got to understand this because these are fibers that they're very, very strong, but they do snap.
Yeah.
And they don't repair once they're snapped. And they were testing it. They had these sound sensors as they were increasing the pressure in the lab on this material.
Listening for sort of
snaps
or whatever.
And it really was. And maybe there's a bit of Netflix kind of drama there as it sort of went crack.
Yeah.
But it was making people jump in the room because it was kind of horrible because you know what the end result of all of this is.
Yeah.
And they're not really, they're not really taking it in, or certainly Stockton Rush isn't taking this in. But his engineering team very much are, and they're trying to tell him, and he's such a domineering individual. So that was all fascinating. And then, of course, you have the director of marine operations, a guy called David Lockridge, Scotsman, very, very brave, very, very forthright, who was really the only person inside the firm to really try and go up against Stockton Rush and just say this isn't safe.
We're not ready. Yeah.
And his thing was about having a kind of third party assessment externally on this submersible. And Stockton Rush, the owner, just was not having any of it. For him, that they were the best people to test.
Right.
Not someone third party, not someone independent. I mean, it's all so wrong, But I found it interesting because you can draw parallels from your experience. All right, I haven't seen that exactly, but I've seen similar things in the financial markets, and in control, and certainly for any kind of almost textbook how not to handle a whistleblower. I mean, really awful. So he made a complaint to OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, who took them in under their whistleblower program. And of course, whistleblower, it's all about no retaliation. And I do think that the people we tend to work with have got really, really great speak up
culture,
policies and culture.
Really improved, definitely.
But what did Stockton Rush do? He went straight after this guy. Sued.
Right.
For fraud, for theft, all this kind of stuff. And the poor guy was basically just left to fight this on his own. There was nothing that OSHA did to kind of help and protect him. So he's just fighting this in the courts. He was doing some smart stuff too, because
did this all happen? Sorry, before. So my assumption is he whistleblown before this journey had gone on. I mean, way before.
Absolutely.
As a kind of going, look, we can't go on with this. We need full testing. We need to go and take it to wherever the deepest. There's probably a swimming pool equivalent somewhere that incredibly deep that you test.
So it came. It was really interesting because also you saw. I mean, hey, it's Netflix, but they really kind of showed you or made it clear, from his perspective, because of course Stockton Rush is not alive anymore and isn't really able to answer all of this. But they showed this one particular journey where Stockton Rush went out and David Lockridge went with him, and they had a couple of other people on board, and they went to see some other wreck that was kind of described as the Everest of shipwrecks, very famous one. Can't recall what it was myself, but they went, and it was showing how foolhardy Stockton Rush was, getting really close, and at one point he basically gets the submersible jammed underneath the hull. And this guy, David Lockridge, who's a really experienced, submarine guy, works on submarines in the Navy for decades, gets them out, saves them, from disaster. But from that point, he has crossed the line with Stockton Rush. Right. And Stockton Rush just wants him out, because he's humiliated him. He's a loss of face, in front of, in his opinion, the people around. And so then you had David Lockridge, really pushing for this external review, and Stockton Rush is like, no, you do a review, do a review internally.
And was this purely an ego thing, or was this as well as sort of financial type thing? As in, it was this thing run on a slight shoestring. So
I think absolutely. I think there was always financial pressures all along the way, and I think also they made a lot of the kind of the fact that for Stockton Rush, this was quite a kind of ego trip, if you like, and he wanted to be like Jeff Bezos. He wanted to be like Elon Musk. He wanted to be seen as someone that was kind of real trailblazer. And of course, they had backers, but there would be limited funds for this kind of thing. And the other thing about the vessel was it wasn't registered, and that's a problem if you take paying passengers. Right. So then there was this interesting thing that they focused in on, the fact that no one was a passenger. They had a term
I think I did
read.
Yes, they were like classed as submariners.
Sort of like I'm a kind of operational
explorer,
engineer. I can't remember what the term is. It's annoying. I wish I kind of written it down beforehand. But there was that. There was this, again, the sort of the complication of it being a US company that launched in Canadian waters, without a flag. So again, that sort of in maritime law, means that they were kind of going under the radar as well.
And I assume therefore kind of probably no insurance kicking around.
There was I don't know even about. They didn't talk about that. But again, just going back to this testing, that was the thing that was so sort of frightening for me. And there was a wonderful moment where the engineers are just trying to explain that once this stuff's broken, it's broken. And cracks appear. The hull is kind of it's
corrupt
gone or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's talking about no, we're just seasoning. We're seasoning it. All these cracks are good. And it is really interesting because the people inside, one partly were drinking the Kool-Aid, and others were just terrified of speaking up because everyone that crossed Stockton Rush went. Yeah. And all of this built up into the disaster as was, the tragedy as was, with these people losing their lives. But what I loved about it, and why I've sort of dragged you on this quick story about the Titan and Anti-Financial Crime Film Club is, as ever, we have a kind of Q&A at the end, and I loved it that, and it provoked so much thought from everyone in the room, and someone asked the question, well, why when all this was going on, did governments not just stop or make them do things? And it really got me thinking about the fact that watching this about submersibles, the risk is so obvious to everyone looking at it, because you're dealing with the deep sea, you're dealing with pressure. It's something we can all get our hands around. We can see that there's a problem coming. We don't even have to be engineers to kind of figure that out. But I think it is so hard in anything to have the vision to realise that there are problems down the track. And of course, we're looking at that with all the benefit of hindsight. If I didn't know that disaster had happened, and I was being shown this documentary about a submersible, and would I really know the disaster that was coming?
At the end, yeah.
And therefore, with the regulators. But I was thinking more about this because you and I have been doing so much more talking, as I'm sure everyone is, about AI. And thinking about, the things that are getting built out there in AI and other things, algorithms or what it happens to be. And who on earth can spot all of this stuff from outside an organization, the problems coming down the line?
Yeah, and it's it's running so fast ahead that regulators, there's no way they can keep up. There's no particular oversight from what we can see. I mean, yes, these companies will have ethics officers, etc. But I mean, actually, there's been some stuff out today from Reuters have done an investigation into stuff in Meta.
That was with the chat bot.
Yes,
got that
exactly.
the guy with dementia, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was a shocking story. DT, just recap that for people, because that, if you haven't seen this, it's an amazing story, isn't it?
I think it came out. I think it may even have been yesterday. But yes, the guy who had a stroke sort of 10 years ago, who'd been very physically fit and mentally fit prior to that, had recovered well from the stroke, but she just had not been as switched on mentally, I think his children would describe it as. And yes, he'd got chatting to a Meta chatbot, which, if you looked very small, it would at the top of the screen, it does say, it is AI underneath it. But he got chatting, and actually the transcript of the total chat runs to a few pages. They're not particularly long, but he was convinced that it was a real person, and this chatbot convinced him to travel to New York to meet her, having had sort of rather flirtatious chat, I suppose it would have been. And
it really was, and it was how quick it made that move to being flirtatious and encouraging him to come and meet her, because it was a her.
Yeah,
and he was completely drawn in.
I think it said as he started the chat a few months before, this is not a real person. But then that disappears once you're 6 lines of text in or whatever it was. And I think, yes, he just didn't realize, and it's incredible. And Reuters have got hold of some of Meta's guidelines to look at what was in there, and it was not quite carte blanche, but it's kind of incredible the sort of stuff they were looking to just keep engagement going. I suppose that's what a lot of these tools are looking to do, is keep the engagement going. And
they made some changes after Reuters got in touch.
Yes,
they've started things like talking sexually to children up to like the age of 13, or things like that. It was quite. I was shocked as a parent reading that story. But I think, as ever with all this stuff, it's about the vulnerable. It's not. We all think in terms of AI and the advances and the risks in terms of the general population.
Surely everyone would know that was a chatbot. But
the catastrophe happens at the tails, doesn't it?
Completely.
Which you and I understand as traders, right? Because it's fine. Most of the time, you're operating within the VAR. It's all good.
Yeah.
And it's that tail where you get absolutely, carried out.
The 10 standard deviation event that should only happen once every 1,000 years, which still seems to happen every 5.
Absolutely. But with the vulnerable around, and that, that's the elderly, it's people with dementia, it's children, it's the lonely, there's just so many pockets of people out there that are, I think, with these companies, collateral damage right now, really, really bad. And I wonder about that from a kind of, for the finance industry. Think about all of the pressure around fossil fuels and the financing of fossil fuels. Will we see, or how long till we see that kind of pressure being brought to bear on the finance industry? Or whether anyone actually is going to take the reins and be responsible in the finance industry to start really putting the pressure on these organizations in the way that someone like Reuters has, for this particular story. There was another amazing thing you showed me, which kind of gave me a lot of insight into, the calculations and so on. You showed me that thing with the equation.
Yes, so I think this is not particularly new news to a lot of people, but actually, yes,
it's new news to me, DT, and that makes it podcast worthy. Sorry, go on.
So a friend sent me this thing in one of the chatbots. I can't remember which one it was, possibly ChatGPT, asking a very basic algebra question and it getting it completely wrong. And I showed this to you, and you're like, well, I can't believe that that's the case, but and I think you pulled out another story about clocks and watches, which you can tell in a second. But the point is, unless you're specifically telling the bot to use Python or whatever to go and do a calculation, it's not it doesn't have any mathematical knowledge embedded into it. All it's done is ingested an absolute load of data as it was being trained, and then it's been shown a formula and gone, well, this looks a bit like the formula in textbook page 17 of this thing I read, whatever, when it, published in 1985, whatever it may be. And the answer that time was minus 0.21. So the answer to your question is minus 0.21. And you look at it and it's, it was a very basic sort of x equals something minus, 3y or something and solve for y. Nothing particularly, mind-blowing from a mathematical standpoint. And it just spews out completely the wrong answer, which, is...
Because it's not calculated.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's just searching and returning.
Correct.
Results, which is that's changed my understanding of this, and I think we're all leveling up, aren't we? I mean, the thing I saw about the watches, which I love, was this guy saying test it, try and ask it for a watch that says 2 minutes after midnight, where the hands are really close together, and it will return pictures of watches, and they're largely at 10 past 10. And that's because that looks so nice. If you're
pointing
selling,
at a 10 and a 2,
your Philip Paget or whatever, that's the clock face to look at. And I was testing that out in the Jubilee Mall at lunch today. And indeed, in all the watch shops, not that there are that many, but there are enough. There it is. 10 to 2. Wow.
So that's what a watch looks like. So if you're asked to replicate a watch, that's what you would come up with.
But here's the thing, right? Because then the guy was explaining that left-handed people get a picture, ask it to produce a picture of a left-handed person, and it's really difficult to get it to do it because it will just return right-handed people because that's the vast majority of what you see, right? Because most people are right-handed. I'm not. So this is really important to me. The Ned Flanders leftorium, yeah?
Quite right.
That's my favourite Simpsons episode. But he made the point that you could get it to produce a picture of a left-handed person, but it wasn't easy to do. Like you had to instruct it really carefully to get back what you want. And I guess that's the kind of learning that we're all doing with this technology, that we've all got to start realising that to actually get the results that we need, we've got to be quite careful about how we instruct and interrogate this stuff. And that's all part of the learning curve. But I think the danger is now, right? We mustn't be releasing stuff too soon. So, the people working on, new product approval, as ever, the most important safeguard in the bank and in the financial industry. And what a hard job on a lot of this stuff. How on earth you kind of can test and look through all of this stuff now, but it's definitely a space. I mean, we're going to be talking a lot more, I think, about AI and some of the impacts as we get towards the end of the year as well, because there's a lot of topics that I want to talk about. I think there's we could probably do only AI podcasts from now to the end of the year. A lot of how people just take the answer as being correct. And I think there's even studies that I think I showed you that article about some medical study about how humans are now making more mistakes in diagnosing certain things because they've been used to the fact that they've had a sort of AI backup, as it were. So they've got, in inverted commas, slightly lazy. And, this is, we're still, it feels like in very early stretch of this revolution. I suppose that's the word I'm looking for, yeah. So for already things to be, it's small statistically significant things to be showing up this early on is concerning. I mean, obviously we chat about it a lot about what the job market will look like. We've both got kids coming through, just out of school or university. And, what the market will look like for them. AI allegedly coming for all these jobs, but, you feel like, will it have all the answers? Will it be able to do all this sort of stuff? And are we going to lose all this sort of skills that have been passed down and that whole apprenticeship structure that exists certainly in banks, certainly in law firms, etc. What happens when you completely take out that bottom layer because you've replaced it all with AI? Then at some stage that bottom layer would have become the top of the pyramid. And how's that resolved? I mean, that's I think these are the kind of things that you and I should explore further in subsequent episodes, because this stuff really interests me, and it's kind of the what ifs. So anyway, well, DT, I think we should do a shout out to the Anti-Financial Crime Film Club.
Definitely. I'll be along to the next one.
Yeah, Ashu Sharma, who runs that. Thanks, Ashu, for continuing such great organisation on that. And we look forward to the next one. I mean, what would the next one be? Another Halloween one. Wow.
Ooh, yes.
That'll be good. I hope I'm around for that one, but we'll see. All right, well, DT, great to talk to you. And look forward to catching up with the listeners on the next episode of the Skadi podcast.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the Skadi podcast, featuring Nick, Corry and Damian Taylor. This podcast is produced by me, Alexandra Mexi. If you found today's episode interesting, you want to be a friend of the show and interact with like-minded people, you should join the Skadi Discord. Our chat community is a big treasure trove of information where you can find all the materials we use to produce our podcasts. If you want to listen to more episodes, then simply search the Skadi podcast on any streaming platform. Feel free to connect with us at Skadi Limited on LinkedIn to read about our research and business relation to anti-financial crime and control functions. Until next time, thank you for listening.